We've got to talk about Arsenal. We've got lots to get through tonight. We must hear from Mikel Arteta on what he has had to say about his squad for this coming season. He said perfection in this league requires different standards to relate that word to winning the Premier League. We know that there are certain positions that we want to improve and give the squad better resources, especially in terms of numbers where we are very short. We are so close. There are moments where we had really fine margins. Well, Frank Leboeuf is joining us now as we delve a little bit deeper into everything that's going on at Arsenal for the season ahead. And given that you are here, Robbo, we'd like to get your thoughts on a few things. First of all, Ricardo Calafiori, if this is to go ahead, yes, what do you think it means for Arsenal?
It means another player that can play at centre-half. It's another player that can play at left-back. Remember, I think Zinchenko has fallen out of favour and could be for sale. Toney has been out on loan for a couple of seasons now and doesn't seem to be in favour either. Kivior hasn't quite been good enough. So Calafiori gives them a lot of options. He's a centre-half, if you saw it at the European Championship, but he's probably going to play at left-back. But he could be a left-back that likes to come in field, like we saw with Zinchenko and Ben White playing that little bit wider on the right-hand side. He's a good player. He's got pace, he's a good defender, and he's also good on the ball. Not so much as an overlapping player, but coming in field and making things happen. So
that's one player, and that's one area that we're talking about here. With regards to what Mikel Arteta has just had to say there and those fine margins, where else do you think they need to strengthen if they are to take the title this season,
you looked at that team there, and remember they've had Jesus as the centre-forward, who didn't quite work for them. He started off brilliantly. Havertz does a good job there, but is he an out-and-out centre-forward? When you need crosses into the box, he's quite good in the air. But someone like Ivan Toney could be the answer. He's not going to play every week, maybe. You know, against some of the big teams, they might play Havertz at centre-forward. But I think they need another option at centre-forward. And Ivan Toney would be that sort of option. You know, somebody that can hold up the play, he can win balls in the air, he'd be aggressive when balls come into the box, particularly when they're trailing in games. So that's another area I think he would like to make them better. And I think in midfield, if they want to play Declan Rice slightly higher up the field and be more advanced, then is Jorginho the best player they could have in that holding midfield role, or Thomas Partey? I think that's another area where they could improve, another central midfield player.
You agree that there's a few areas that they could do with strength?
I do. I certainly think in midfield alongside Declan Rice, there's a huge need there. And while, yes, you applaud the signing of Calafiori, kind of given the problems that they've had at left-back, you look at Arsenal's defensive record, which was just about as good as it gets. Defence isn't the first thing you think of when you think Arsenal need to improve. But there was a need. It was addressed, and I think addressed very well by Mikel Arteta. But it really does come down to Arsenal's attacking options. And while Havertz at times popped up at key moments and key games with goals, I'm just not sold on Havertz as the striker to lead a team to win the Premier League. And I feel the same about Gabriel Jesus, who I thought started wonderfully well when he first joined Arsenal. But because of injuries, I think it has waned, and it's shown a need there. So there is still that department to be addressed. And Arteta's right. Margins are really thin, especially when you consider how good Manchester City just continue to be. Now, there are questions about them, what business they do this summer, all the charges that they're still facing, what kind of happens as that progresses during the course of the season. But if you take all those as, well, not really your business, we have to be better than what Manchester City showed us to be last season. Yeah, I still think there's a little bit of work to be done, because for as good as Arsenal were, again, you just come up short.
So just before I do go to Frank here, if you are to bring in, say, an Ivan Toney, what actually happens to Havertz? He continues to start and Ivan Toney comes off the bench?
For certain games, maybe so. But if you're buying a centre-forward, and this is where Arteta's got to be slightly brave, he's built an environment where everybody's nice and cosy. He's even talked, we didn't carry that interview on, where he talked about we have to give more love to the players we've got. At some point, he has to be a little bit like Pep Guardiola and say, I don't care how I'm going to upset the players at times. I'm going to bring in 3 or 4 more new players that are going to put these players under pressure. And if they don't play well enough, those players are going to be out of the team maybe for 6 or 7 weeks. That's what Pep Guardiola does, and that's why he's made them champions, as well as being a great coach. That's maybe what Arteta's got to do. He can't be frightened of upsetting players. He's got to bring new players in and make the right decisions with those players if certain players aren't playing quite well enough.
But do you think Frank Arteta to be a little bit more ruthless this season if he is to achieve bigger things?
Well, if he wants to bring some strengths inside the squad, he will have to. But now it's the question mark would be how the squad would going to respond to him. You have to be legit in order to give orders to the players and to make them accepting your decisions. Guardiola, because of his past, because of his success, has that legitimate positioning. I'm still wondering at which level Arteta is with the players to be accepted as the guy who takes decision. If you take a Toney and you sign him for I think around 50 million, do you think he's going to be happy to be just on the bench because he plays for Arsenal, who didn't win anything? Well, the Premier League for some years? No, I think he wants to play. So he might go to another club because he wants to play. And because he's been bought for 50 million, it will be legit to say, well, you know what, you take me to be on the bench. I'm not accepting that decision. So, and also what's going to happen with Jesus if Toney comes or Havertz? He will have to deal with the dressing room. As we talk about the margins and the fine margins, that's also something you have to deal with. When Guardiola doesn't need to deal with that because he's legit. Because what he did before to Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and also Manchester City. Nobody going to contest what he says, where we don't know with Arteta how it's going to work.
Well, given that we are talking about Pep Guardiola, he's actually come out to say that Kevin De Bruyne will be sticking around at Manchester City and not going off to the Saudi Pro League this summer just yet. Kevin is not going. I don't think you need to read between any lines here. He's pretty much saying it himself. He is going nowhere. And Pep Guardiola has also spoken about other potential transfers when he was asked if there would be more signings before the close of the transfer window. Same squad. Will the same squad be enough this season, Robbo?
Depending on what other sides do. I think he might need to just adjust one or two things. One or two players might be just past their best. I wouldn't say Kevin De Bruyne is that at the moment. Kevin De Bruyne, if he's fit, is still a magnificent player. There's no doubt about it. And he makes Man City a better team. Whenever I see Kevin De Bruyne on the field, there's problems for the opposition. When he's fully fit, the problem he's had in the last year or so is that he hasn't been fully fit, and that has affected his performances.
Yeah, obviously that was a conversation that was coming up yesterday, wasn't it, Shaka? That was divided opinion as well here.
Absolutely, and nobody challenges Kevin De Bruyne's quality when he's fit. And then, of course, he's got a year left on his contract, and again, bringing up the 115 charges that Manchester City are facing, and I know that's already passed, but then profit and sustainability, and just kind of given how Manchester City have done their business, do you turn down 25 or 30 million for a player that you lose for free in a year's time? And given the former Phil Foden can probably just slot right in and play centrally, and you don't miss an awful lot. So I think from purely footballing terms and no money involved, yes, you're happy to keep Kevin De Bruyne. If you know, again, kind of falling off in the last two seasons, he only gives you 15 or 20 games a season. Given the quality that we've seen, fine, you take that. But I think when you're talking about Manchester City and today's football and how much finances matter, I'm not sure you turn down that kind of money, even for a club as well-financed as City.
It's an interesting situation, isn't it, Frank? Because we're looking at 4 Premier League titles in a row. They'll be going up for a 5th consecutive this season. And you often say that if you want to continue winning, you want to continue being champions, you do need to reinforce and you do need to ensure that you are always the best that is out there.
Yeah, that's the problem when you are Manchester City and you're already at the top of the top. So how do you restrain your squad? I think you have to adjust. And no one more than Pep Guardiola know exactly what to do in that matter. And if he feels that De Bruyne is not the De Bruyne from before, he will get rid of him easily, no problem. No sentiments whatsoever. Thank you very much. You've done great, but we have to move on. And it goes for everybody. See Ederson. I think Ederson is at question marks, and you have the second goalkeeper who could be more involved. And if needed, Guardiola will take that decision. So he can restrain within the squad, where you have young players who can play and can be more involved little by little, because you have that spine with Diaz, with Rodri, with of course De Bruyne if he's fit, Haaland and Foden, that you can go very far again and win the 5th Premier League title in a row. So I have no concerns. We know that they're going to struggle maybe at the beginning, like they always do for the last 2 seasons at least, and then they're going to adjust. And again, Guardiola knows how to do that. He knows how to motivate his squad and to make sure that everybody feels involved.
He might have to adjust very early on in the season. If Ederson is to go, is Ortega enough? If he is to go, what happens here?
Well, I've seen him play quite a bit. He's, I think, just as good a shot stopper as Ederson. He's not as good on the ball, but he's good on the ball. And a Man City goalkeeper has to be composed and pick out the right passes. He's good with crosses coming into the box. Shaka would know more about that than I would, but I would say Ortega is good enough to take over from Ederson.
I know, obviously this came up yesterday too, didn't it, Shaka?
Agreed. And everything I've seen of Ortega, albeit as a number 2 without that regular run of games, whenever he's been asked to play, and there are exceptions, which I know Stevie Nicol wouldn't allow me just to gloss over, but he's performed well and credibly. And I think, and it's also important, just kind of given Pep Guardiola and what he expects of his goalkeepers, Ortega has equipped himself well. You contrast that with, let's say, a Claudio Bravo, who Pep Guardiola worked with at Barcelona, but then comes and asks for a certain system, and he couldn't fit in, and how quickly he moved on. There was no suggestion of that. Yes, he doesn't have the passing range of Ederson, but he will not, or Sydney, I do not think, has let Pep Guardiola down.
He won't let him make too many mistakes. No. Stefan was in goal for the semi-final, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Of the FA Cup. Made 2 mistakes and got one of the goals was he was accountable for trying to play out from the back and didn't do it very well. Off you go. So Ortega's going to have to play well from the start.
Yeah, with that ruthlessness. With
and he has to be ruthless, yeah.
Obviously, Manchester City in pre-season action, their first game coming up against Celtic. We'll be covering that game tonight. There's a couple of players and big names as well, Robbo, that you're looking out for.
I very rarely see him play a forward pass. And it's no surprise that he's not in the team. You know, I don't even understand how he gets in the side because he doesn't affect games. If you're a central midfield player, you can slow things down and try and dictate the pace of a game. When you're playing on the left wing, you're expected to create goals. You're expected to go past people. You're expected to play little 1-2s. And whenever he's played, I would say 90% of his passes go back to the fullback, which is not affecting the game. He has to get back to the player he was at Aston Villa, when he was going past people, winning free kicks on the edge of the box. He was more dynamic. He was running half the length of the field with the ball when there was space in front of him. I don't know what's changed, whether Pep Guardiola has changed him or whether he's changed himself and lost his confidence or lost his speed. But I just don't see how he gets in Manchester City's team at all.
Grealish, for me, just dwells on the ball too long for Manchester City. At Aston Villa, when you're central to everything and every single ball is coming through you, you can sit on it and you can make your decisions as you please. But when you're Manchester City and there's far more of a team dynamic, and even if you want to talk individuals, you're a long way off being that man, kind of just given who Pep Guardiola has been able to call on. You get it, you take too many touches, and all of a sudden the play just kind of fizzles. And that is no good for City. And for me, why Grealish has found himself so out of favour.
Frank, do you agree with what the guys are saying here? And for Grealish, how does he get back to that version of himself that was so lauded?
The problem that I have with Guardiola way of thinking the football is exactly the example of Grealish. You take somebody who played for Aston Villa and was the center of attention. Therefore, that guy was taking risks, trying to take on players, and sometimes losing the ball, but trying it. When he joined Manchester City, Guardiola explained to him, we don't lose the ball. We keep the ball. We are patient. We try to tire the opposition, and it's only when we have a possibility of pass and get the killer pass that we do it. But we mostly never take on players. That's what we see throughout all the season. And when you have Grealish, you hear that and you say, okay, so I can't do what I was doing, so I'm going to be patient and I'm going to go back and give the ball back all the time. And you don't see what made Grealish special when he was playing for Aston Villa. And I'm sorry, but Grealish might be responsible a little bit because he doesn't try, But you have to ask the question, is Grealish is the right type of player to play for Manchester City the way Guardiola wants them to play?
Another player that it could be a big season for, in your opinion especially, Robbo, is Erling Haaland.
Of course, he's had 2 great years in terms of goal scoring. But also, I don't think his movement's been quite good enough. He's quite happy just to be a goal scorer. And if he wants to develop into becoming a world-class player, he's got to do more in the general play, in my view. And he's got to show people... Because you will never improve as a player if you're touching the ball 9 times in a half. It's not good enough.
I think it's difficult to say a player who scored 38 goals in 45 games had a disappointing season. But truth is, I thought last season, by Erling Haaland's standards, was a little bit disappointing. When you see that, when you contrast that with the first season that he had. And for me, I thought this kind of leans into what Frank was saying about Grealish. At times during the course of the season, especially in the season, you saw Haaland not getting on the ball, getting frustrated, having to drop deep into midfield just to get a touch on the ball. Then Guardiola says, we don't want you deep in midfield, go further up the park. So he's sitting on the shoulders of centre-halves, but he's not touching the ball. And I think those frustrations just started to grow. And that you can't contrast that with Borussia Dortmund, where he's involved and they're far more direct, and it just didn't tie in. That being said, while you can look at his touches, I thought during the course of, you can look at the 38 goals, during the course of the season, there were big games and big moments that Erling Haaland fluffed his lines that could have had such a different effect. Well, they won the league, but certainly in the Champions League, maybe we're having a different discussion about how their Champions League season went, and I know they lost the penalties on Real Madrid, but we could be having a different discussion. So while, again, few touches, not the heights of the previous season, and big misses in big games, which you couldn't really see in his first season, I think Erling Haaland last season was a little bit disappointing.
Frank?
Yeah, different players, same problem, same issue. As Robo said, you know, when he plays for Norway, he takes the leadership. So we see him being more involved, and that's the contrary with Manchester City. As Shaka mentioned, when he was playing for Dortmund, he was coming down and was taking the ball, but it's not possible for City. Guardiola sent him back to his positioning, and then he gets frustrated. And you know, it's like somebody who doesn't eat for like 2 days. When you give him some good sandwich, he doesn't take the time to appreciate it. He goes and gets crazy, and then have a digestion problem. That's what it is with Haaland. He doesn't touch the ball. Makes one run, 2 runs, 10 runs, then suddenly touches the ball, and he's so happy. Because he's not clever anymore, because he's so touched rarely the ball that the guy gets frustrated and misses, like we saw last year, easy chances. And for his degree, for his level, he should be in every time. But he touches like 3-4 balls a game, and he has to score every time. That's not the way I see football. I must be so frustrated for him.
We do apologise in advance to Jan Arge-Fjortoft in case he is watching this segment tonight here on ESPN FC. Sorry, Jan. I had nothing to do with this. It's all on these guys.